Okay, I think, let me see. We are live. Um, okay, so let's see. We'll okay, so YouTube. Mhm. Okay, so just checking the feed. Okay. So it is delayed a bit. That's interesting. I'm learning a lot here too, as well. And the only reason I'm going to be talking about myself a bit before people get on or whatnot is because this will be a recording, will be posted. So I want people to get the most value out of it. So I'm getting just a few things tightened up here. The camera, I'm going to try to change that a bit more. Hold on. I'd like to get it so it's. Okay. I guess that's what we're gonna have to. That's what we got. So, all right. Let us see here. So I'm just gonna be putting this out on a few socials real quick. Hope we get. I really don't like that angle. I'll be right back. All right, just fixing up a few things here. We'll be starting momentarily. All right, let's see here. I should probably play some music or just something to. Hopefully, this doesn't get me in trouble. Let's see what's a good song I play on repeat that won't be too bad. No. Let's see. Going to be going on real quick, just setting up a few more things. 1 second. We'll call that good. All right, let's see here. Okay, let's see. Get off Instagram. Okay, so there's several things I wanted to cover tonight. So first is a few tips actually on running form. I gotta make sure that the camera on running form and running stride. So obviously, this channel stuff I do is pretty much, I like to run, I like to be in the wild, I like to see animals, all that kind of stuff. So one of the things obviously with running is stride. And a key thing about that is the fact that when you have a weak stride, it's going to affect everything else. So let's say you're super fit, you've got a great, cardiovascular system, you breathe very well, and you're doing a lot of good things that way. Hold on, this light is bad. Try something. Oh. Sorry, I was talking about stride. So one of the things about that is the fact that it doesn't matter how fit you are, what your cardiovascular system is like. Let's say how many years you've been running. If your stride starts to go down, then the rest of your running will also go down. So a few points about that. One is the fact that actually these aren't even in the picture. Okay, so real quick, I do have some of the new tortoises right here. I thought they'd be, you could see them the whole time, but you can't. Um, just something cool to see in the background. So running stride, that is the placement of how quick the other foot crosses the other. And a key to doing that, and there's a few tips. First one is when you exhale, if you exhale in the same leg each set of a stride, then you're going to be putting subconsciously more, initiative, more exertion, more push into that leg. So if you're always, starting an exhale, and let's say your right leg, you might not know it. Maybe go for a run and see if this is actually true, but it probably is. You're actually exhaling on that breath and putting more strength in that leg. So the key is to exhale on a separate leg each set. So essentially, if you're running, 2 beats, you inhale 2, and then you exhale 3, you inhale 2, you exhale for 3 beats. So then you kind of solve the problem of having an irregular stride. Another one is having a good cadence. That's essentially the beats per minute that your feet are hitting the ground while you're running. So some runners, it's like 160, some do 170, some are like at 180. The main thing that will determine this is, how tall you are, your leg height, but also having a shorter stride, sprinters know, means more speed and distance over time, because essentially the less time your legs are on the ground and the more times they're moving, the faster you're going to go. So that's another thing is you want to be looking, if you're running, if you're just doing a little light jog, your cadence is probably too low. You're probably like, maybe doing 150, 140, and you might feel okay, all that stuff. But over time, that more pressure on each leg for a long amount of time is not going to be good. And then the last one, the third thing, really is good for building good stride and for running is, and if anyone's, thanks, I can see some people jumping in now. Hopefully get it up a little more, but this is great. Feel free to send a chat in or whatever you'd like. But last point on the stride is you have to make sure that you do some barefoot running. Again, barefoot running is not super popular. It's probably, not everyone really wants to do it. But if you're like at a beach, if you can find a grassy patch, or if there's like a carpeted area in your house, whatever, barefoot running really helps the body kind of auto-correct itself to a better running form. There's a reason why a lot of people go barefoot running. They're like, what's going on? Like, what am I, like, they can tell it's way different. And that's kind of an issue. If your barefoot running is like a foreign feeling than to your regular running, it usually means, there's a lot of muscular problems there. Maybe there's just a form problem, but also your stride will be greatly improved with barefoot running. So that's kind of on that. And then we do have a few animals here today. So I did mention the redfoot tortoises. Let me see, make sure these are okay. I'm trying to look at the camera. So we've got one here. We've got another one here. These were at the expo I was at. He's got some dirt in his face. There we go. At the expo I went to, and I've got a nice balcony, enough room for them to be on, so they can, have a much larger area than an average terrarium. They're cool, like tortoises. These can live up to like 70 years. So it's an investment. but you got to think of that when you're getting a pet. And they're not native to Florida. So like if you can't just, get rid of them, as the problem with the Everglades is very well documented, is just infestated with um, invasive animals. So that's the two tortoises we have there. And we also have behind me, I brought in these plants from the balcony, but let me make sure he's still there. Yeah, there we go. So it's all right. We've got the veiled chameleon. So this guy is really cool. Let me make sure that's okay. Actually, hold on. This might help with the lighting. Yeah, there we go. So this is a veiled chameleon. They are native to mostly Africa, South Europe, very southern Europe, and then parts of obviously Madagascar and South India. But these guys are cool. Obviously, he feels a little intimidated or threatened right now. He's, obviously not in a tree in a nice area, so he's a little worried. But that's one of those. These are all over Florida. If you live in Florida, you know this very well. But we're gonna put him back safely because we don't want him to. Let's see. Come on. Okay, there we go. Do you see him climbing? Yeah, he's climbing. Yeah, there we go. But anyhow, cool animal. That's the few I have here right now, besides the cat somewhere. Yeah. All right. So now we're gonna go on to the next topic. Let's see. Do I want to? Yeah. So this one, going to So right now, if you're not aware, Florida has a bunch of amendments up, and I might talk about the other ones, just the main ones around wildlife. So the main one around wildlife is there's Amendment 2, and I've already put a video out there on Instagram, and it's a very weird amendment because it's essentially saying it wants to cement protections for Floridians to hunt and fish. Pretty obvious, pretty simple. I mean, I would support it, but it seems very, very easy of an amendment. It's like having a freedom of speech amendment. It's like, okay, yeah, we want that, so we should have that. The only problem with this amendment is one that's usually, if there's this much good intention behind something in politics, if you've learned or you're in politics for any amount of time, the ones that are really selling how good they are or how like wonderful something's going to be without any sort of critical thinking or common sense, usually it's too good to be true. So this one is still the main thing is just too vague. It only mentions preferred conservation methods, and this is the whole thing, but essentially saying when the state does management, it's gonna, instead of always using effective means, which is something more like putting more resources, more time into something, it's going to use preferred. So like kind of making things easier, but it might not be as to the same magnitude. So for an example, let's say instead of using a controlled burn to manage a type of grass in a palmetto or something, or a pine forest, they would maybe just, have some trimming go through there, just trim some of the stuff, cut a few trees down, whatever. And it would work, but it wouldn't be as effective. And so there's some weird stuff about, would this just make their job, like essentially take away the initiative to do the job properly? So that's kind of risky. And then the other mention, and this is where like you have groups that are oddly behind, Big Sugar does exist in Florida. If you're not aware, essentially Florida, let's bring up the map here real quick. So if you think of Florida, you think of the Everglades at the south there. Right above the Everglades proper, you could say, is the Lake Okeechobee. And all around Lake Okeechobee are sugarcane. Obviously, very needed. Obviously, in America, there's a lot of sugar consumption and production. But the problem is it's not exactly that. It uses a lot of water. And in Florida, that's a critical resource. There's a lot of burning they have to do at the end of each crop year. So it releases a bunch of stuff. So what's odd, though, is there's proponents of Big Sugar actually behind this bill, which is somewhat odd because it's not like, Big Sugar has a direct stake in hunting. So that's, just something to look at. But then you also have the like Florida tribes, Native Americans in Florida that are also behind this because of the language of traditional hunting method in the bill. Only problem with that, though, is it's, again, just so vague. Literally these two concepts are very vague. It seems like an open door to other interests. And people might say, hey, they're not going to go crazy. This is going to be a sensible thing. In the last year, and actually just a few months ago, John Dickinson State Park, right north of here in West Palm, and a few others, there were proposals by the Florida Department of Environmental Protection to build golf courses, a lodge or two, and just a bunch of weird like building on the state parks. This wasn't like, it's next to a mall or there's a new, set of apartments coming and they want to build, some amenities. This is literally a middle of a state park, cutting things down and building on it. So it seems like the wrong place, especially when your name is environmental protection. So that's where it gets a little tricky. And um, and so exactly on that point is, can we trust the state to go through with, they say, well, we're going to do this thing. We have these laws. We have this proposal. Are they going to follow through with it if they're doing stuff like that? And another case in point for this year was this was before the state park kind of fiasco, and this was a few months ago. There's a park in the middle of Orlando called Split Oak, and it's kind of ironically named that because the Fish and Wildlife Commission, the same ones that have a direct state in this proposed amendment 2, they actually looked at plans and are going forward with it. There's been a resistance and there's, a bunch of stuff working, and it's local politics, municipal stuff. It's a lot of stuff going on, but it's still going in the forward direction of the proposed building a road through this park for, greater access to, I understand it. Roads help people get from A to B. It helps stores operate, helps businesses operate. But what's kind of interesting here and not great at all is this whole area was under a perpetual easement, a perpetual conservation easement. These are essentially, they're made by man, so I guess it can be undone by us as well. But essentially, it's a piece of paper, it's a law, it's stuff we go through that says we are not going to develop this piece of land. It's been deemed for conservation, and henceforth, blah, 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 protect it. And there's a bunch of different statuses of these that exist across the country and by state. But this one, conservation, perpetual easement, it seemed pretty cut and clear. So the fact that it was, and there's a bunch of fancy language, essentially say, we kind of want to change our mind now because there's such an economic benefit, which that may be the point. But if you look at Orlando, it's essentially, you've probably heard of, Universal, Disney Park, all this stuff there, but it's a very sprawling city. It's not like it's not like Miami that's relatively tight knit in that corner of Florida. It's very sprawling, and it goes, there's really not like there's a downtown. There's another place that, downtown. It's very spread out. So when you already have an area like that being developed, and then one of the largest wild areas there is going to get split in half, it seems kind of a problem. And that's where, again, and leading actually to the third point of what I want to talk about tonight is, if Florida and Floridians, which seem, especially with the outcry of the state park issue and this Split Oak thing, it seems like most Floridians, especially ones that have been here for a bit, or the ones that moved down maybe 4 years ago, and they saw all these people come down and stuff really starting to disappear in terms of access to fishing, access to hiking. Not necessarily that they were gone forever, but the drive to get to a nice trail or the drive to get to a nice fishing spot was taking farther and farther out. Okay. And again, I'm, open to questions, open to anything. This is just trying to have a conversation, just keeping it light. Feel free to send anything in. But this last point on what Florida could do as an amendment with the amount of support that there already is for kind of conservation, outdoor stuff, recreation, hunting, fishing, is an amendment that actually protects these wild areas, that the ones that remain. By one, they need to probably do some audits on these departments that are kind of going haywire with what they're doing. And again, government audits, keeping government in check. We're in the right country for that. We should be doing that already. And with the fact that of what we have found out this year through whistleblowers and people coming forward, and they were, willing to do that and lose their job. What else is there? Obviously it's not even, there's, plenty of things in government that you can point to and say, all right, something's not adding up. But when the Department of Environmental Protection is literally not living up to their name, it's probably time to change that. So one, audits of that, FWC, you will probably audit, or at least look, and this isn't audit assuming there are bad things, just to find out anything. Probably the South Florida Water Management District. They do a lot of, obviously, managing the water, and that natural resource is massive in Florida. So that would be a good one to look at. Fishing game, maybe. But yeah, definitely those. And then two is there's things called land banking and land banking and water banking. So sometimes when companies, usually these are very, very large companies, corporations that can do this because they have the money. Essentially, they say, we want to develop this strip of land and build XYZ. But on that strip of land, there is, let's say there's a small forest and there's a swampland and there's, generally they can't get away with much if there's like an endangered species anymore. But let's say there's a swamp and there's some land there. They can say, we'll buy credits. We'll use this land banking system. We'll buy to save land over in this other area that we're not going to build on, but we'll put money towards saving it, protecting it, not having it being built on for the time being. And then they can go and develop that other part. So it's kind of odd. And then wetland banking is same concept, but it's even more strenuous because wetlands are like, as an ecosystem, the one that's commonly getting developed because they're usually in preferred areas. It's usually a area that is already frequented by people. So taking those requirements and I guess ramping them up. So instead of just like, an eye for an eye or an easy process, make it, all right, we have to, if you're really going to do this, you're going to have to say protect 3-4 times the amount proposed what we used to, stuff like that. Or essentially trying to divert that tactic being used, because if you're just going to build on one area that was wild and save another that was wild, it's like one for one. It's not exactly like there's a gain of wild lands in Florida or North America. So that's where it gets tricky. So reducing that, and then having Florida, when developers are there, or when the state wants to develop something or anything of that sort, there would be funds diverted to, let's say, a rewilding fund. Because in Florida, if you've driven through, especially if you go through the center part of the state or on the outskirts of Miami, West Palm, any of the large cities, there are abandoned, dilapidated, falling apart areas, especially in the center of the state where they're old. The citrus industry used to be massive in Florida, and it's greatly reduced. So there's a lot of empty areas, homes from that leaving. Cattle ranching used to be massive in Florida. I think it used to be number 2 or 3 behind Texas at one point. And now it's maybe 10 or 12 or something like that. So there's just these areas that people have left, industries have died, or parts of cities that are just kind of that same thing, where they lay ruined or not being used. And because developers aren't necessarily going in there and always improving those areas, because it can be very expensive to take those out, having funds diverted from development projects, state, private, whatever, in Florida, and having that money being used to actually take away those buildings, let it go back to being wild, putting a park there or something if the state needs to make some revenue, and essentially trying to push, because there's one thing if we're going to say, well, let's save this land so we can hunt here. Let's save this creek so we can fish here. Let's save this cool, old, Native American mound for visiting or for hiking, whatever this stuff. And it's kind of like a zero-sum game. It's really, we're kind of, when we do that and then the rest of the part of the state is going behind, it's really, you tally up all the cards at the end of the day. Historically, Florida is like at one of its worst points. Whether it's very good on one hand for, economy, people coming down, it's great. And that's good. We need that, especially for the tourism in Florida. That's massive. And Miami becoming, kind of one of the pinnacle cities of America, where it used to just be, a beach town type thing. So there's improvements there, but the problem is Florida, 50 years ago, and then 100 years ago was better in many areas. It was more land protected. There was more wild areas. So that's where we can't just be looking at, all right, well, we'll do one for one, because at the end of the day, over time, that usually doesn't lead out to being pretty well. And okay, so probably getting, we'll go a little bit more here, but yeah, so that's kind of like looking at a way to ease what's been going on currently in Florida, because right now you have it's the fishing capital of the world, so you need to have those fisheries intact. You need to, if you just look at the Florida Keys, it's all based, unless you're going for like Key West for the social area, it's all fishing, it's all water related, it's all diving, it's all reef based. So that whole economy will go underwater literally if, let's say, there was a massive fail in the fishing industry, or there was a like what we just saw with kind of the sawtooth the sawtooth shark, and those are really cool. If you haven't seen one, they're essentially a shark with a saw blade at the front with teeth sticking out. They get pretty big, and we had a bunch of those actually die off in the last. I think it was kind of documented. I think 2 years ago, they were just like spinning around and dying and all this stuff, and not good because they're already endangered. Um, and so with those guys, they didn't really know what was going on exactly. It turned out in the end, they found essentially it was, and happens a lot in nature. So it was a like an algae related thing that spurred up more because they usually are the way they feed is they're benthic, so they're shaking up the bottom to feed anyhow. So they're shaking stuff up nonetheless. And so that usual stuff was influenced by some like other algae parasite that was being stirred up by pollution. So you had one thing that was already getting heightened because of pollution swimming in the air or in the water, and then when the sawtooth was coming by and shaking up the bottom to eat, it was adding to that effect, and then it would get in it, and it would cause it. They would like spin around. They were dying. All this weird stuff. And at the end of the day, it's like one, it was proved this is a natural occurrence. Technically, like it happens naturally. It's not a chemical that was directly put into the animal from humans, but it was triggered as a larger event because of pollutants. So this is something where, let's say that had been, 20 times the scale, which no, that'd be too much. Let's say 3 times the scale, and you lost sawtooth, you lost, let's say snapper were affected or tarpon. That would be very big for Florida's fisheries. So it's stuff like that where this stuff can't just be seen as, well, we're building some land over here in Orlando, so we're fine. Like Keys are never going to be affected. So it's that kind of that mentality that the state of Florida has to look at it instead of how can we use. And this is another case. There's some I forgot the name, but a big state forest in the north part of Florida. So it's mostly pine and hardwood. It's not like something in Miami or towards the Everglades of palms and cypress. It's a completely different ecosystem. But anyhow, they were using that, and the state decided that there was a surplus of natural land in that forest, which, however you get to that conclusion, doesn't make sense. And so we have a surplus here, so we can take and build a golf course over here on this other wild area because there's a surplus now. So it's stuff like that where it's not even the golf course isn't the problem. The problem is that we're saying this wild area, or this part that's been conserved, or this part where the locals have enjoyed it for a long time. They like to hunt, fish there, whatever, hike, run, whatever it is. And now we're just arbitrarily making up these terms that things are in surplus being wild, which is pretty laughable. You consider if you take it, and I'll have to bring this up next time, the next stream. If you do like a time lapse of Florida, like essentially when we first had planes flying in the air and taking aerial photos, you start with that. I mean, probably 1950s, maybe 60s in Florida. No, before that, maybe. But you take those photos, you compile them, you look at it for the last like 50, 60 years. They actually did this in Path of the Panther movie, a documentary on the Florida Panther, how it's doing, how its population is hopefully going to come back. But anyhow, essentially that time lapse, you can see the overall picture of Florida, what's going on. So overall, it's losing land to development. On the other part, compared to and I'm going to end on this, in the 60s and 70s, I mean, the alligator was almost going to go extinct, or at least like severely reduced. So imagine the alligator, something we see, in a canal, behind your house, on the golf course, walking through Naples, walking through Fort Myers. I mean, they're everywhere now. Those almost used to be gone in Florida. And the only reason was, hunting and people, it was, a large, scary reptile that you didn't want near your kids. So you took care of it. And obviously, if it's going to be a direct threat to you, then that does seem appropriate. But what has happened since then, because of conservation, education, we've understood this animal better, and we've understood there's a limited amount. Even if it's, some like today, if you ask someone, could the alligator go extinct? They'd probably say, no, it's everywhere. Like I see it over there. It's behind this creek over here. One ate this old lady the other day, which has happened in Florida, I think, a few times this year. Just statistically, amount of people walking near a body of water, and sometimes you're not paying attention, or if you're impaired or you're older, then it's going to be a problem. There we go. Thanks, Chris. So we got some people, yeah, definitely send in chat. Thank you. But yeah, so the fact that an alligator would almost be extinct is something that we can't really forget because that was that was our parents' generation, or maybe, yeah, parents' generation if you're around 25. So the fact is, we aren't that far away from triggering more events that could be a problem. Needless to say, there are several, new organizations in Florida, bipartisan, of both parties, of many ideologies, that are looking at how to save what we have left of the resources and expanding them. So that's something that's key. Um, okay, no, I'm not going to explain private political views, but definitely on the environment, for sure, we've got to protect more of it. That's something that benefits all of us. And the next one, I will still be going into more of, kind of how Florida can look at amendment, because the ones that it has now, proposed ones, are just not that effective. So again, on your running stride, gotta make sure you're exhaling on the separate leg each time, the opposite leg each time. You've got to make sure you're doing a good cadence, 170 to 180, depending on how tall you are. Essentially, you're probably going to be thinking you're taking too many steps when you start to like analyze where you are. 3, barefoot running. And obviously, you talked about, the animals here. Putting them out one last time, and they're starting to move around. But see how close we can get it. But yeah, these guys are cool. They get big too. I think from what I was talking to the guy at the expo, and from what I've seen, is like it can get probably like, almost the size of this table in front of me. So that would be cool. 70 years. I won't be here, but maybe. Kids will see it. But yeah, we got the chameleon over there. He's gonna try and make a break for it. So I'm gonna have to go save him. And yes, thanks, Chris. Yeah. Let's see. Just okay, cool. Yeah, so this will be posted on YouTube. I will be probably sticking to YouTube for now. And then once YouTube is more built up, because I found that the shorts do way better than a regular video like this. So, but you obviously have to have videos like this to share more of what your content is. So that's where we're going this direction. I'm going to build that out before I build up Rumble. And again, on Instagram, at Sergey at Sergey _ Kelly. Obviously, that's where most of my stuff is. It's been doing well. I think it's up like 4,000 in the last, it's like April or so. So that's going well. Going to keep using that. Again, if anyone has any last minute questions, Chris or anyone else, definitely send them in, because it's going to be wrapping up here shortly. Let's see. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, so any last minute questions, let me know. But again, I'm going to be doing, it was a little off schedule this week, but I would like to be in the schedule of, I did a video last week, a live stream last week on Tuesday. This week was Wednesday. Going to try to go back to Tuesday for next week. On the weekends, it'll be a pre-recorded video for now, posted between Saturday and early Sunday. So that way you have time to watch it Saturday or Sunday or through the week. And again, thanks for everyone for being here. Main point is just to show a passion for Florida wildlife, for running in Florida's wildlife, and for, just conservation in general. But thanks, everyone. And yep, great to see you defending the environment in the comments. All right. But yeah, everyone have a good night, and thank you for tuning in. Let's figure out how to end this stream here before I say anything embarrassing.